Now let's take a look at customers, tasks, and team members. These three sections of the template are set up very similar to each other, so I'm going to cover them kind of together. Um, so we started to look at customers in the last video and how they are pulled into the dashboard. So just to kind of pick up where we left off there, we've got really 4 pages in this customers section. One is the customer add window, the other is customer detail, then there's customer list, and then the grid row, which is the row that gets pulled into um, the list for customers. We kind of already looked at how this customer list um, and these rows work together. We have basically a clone of this customers list on the dashboard already. The only difference is on the dashboard, it's a table of recent customers and it's limited to 5. On the main customers view, which you would see if you clicked the customers nav on the left-hand side of the app, in this main view, they're not limited to 5. So we can actually go in here and take a look at this grid list and go to the child page. We can take a look at how this data is bound. We can see that we've got image, name, and email address for each customer. And if you look at the data binding, these are pulled from the customer's data collection, and the fields are image, name, and email. If we go back to this main view here, we can see that we still have the plus button, the plus icon that lets us add new customers. Just like in the dashboard view that we looked at in the last video, that will pull up the window for add customer. This add customer window has a title, and then it's got a image uploader so that you can pick the image for the customer. And then again, we have name, email, or I should say name and email fields, and then lastly, a notes field. And this just lets you add a note that will go with each customer record. So these name and email fields work very similar to the login and registration fields, specifically the registration form that we looked at in the one of the earlier videos on registration. We can see here that on key up, there's a validation that's done first on the name, just to make sure that it's not empty. And if it's not, we enable that button for the create. So we enable the button basically to submit this form and create that customer. And we can see that the last step of this flow is to set the on click to the action for creating a customer. This action for creating a customer adds them to the customer's data collection, sets the name from the name field, the email from the email field, and the notes from the notes field. It also sets the image to the value of the image uploader, sets archive to 0, so that by default these customers are visible and not archived. And then it sets the company ID to the current company ID. Once that customer gets created, we close the lightbox. And then here's where you see a flow that runs to bring down that system message. So if you remember right here above our app, we have this sort of hidden system message that's out of view. This will pop down into view after the new customer is created and that lightbox is closed. So that's how this customer creation works. Again, all of this is connected out of the box. When you first launch this template, you don't have to hook any of this up. It's already connected. You can literally jump into the app and start creating customers and tasks and things like that. In any of the table views, so if you're looking at recent customers or if you're looking at the all customers list, It's when you click on one, it's going to load this customer detail view. So if we go to the customer detail view, we see that it's a very similar layout. The only difference is we have a close and an archive button. But all the bindings for this are already set up. So we can see that the image upload is pre-populated with the image field from the data collection, and then the same for name, email, and notes. These will all be pre-populated. As I mentioned, the one difference in this view is we have a close and an archive button. If we look at the actions or the flows on this page, we'll see that there's an action for archiving the customer. And what this does is it updates the record in the customer's collection and sets archived to 1. So that will mark that customer record as archived. And in these table views that we looked at before, archived is hidden by default. On the customer list, there's this toggle here that allows you to include archived. So this toggle has an event attached to it called toggle condition. And this will essentially run, when this is set to toggled, it's going to run this action that refreshes the customers with the archived included. So it's going to set that grid list and populate it with the customers, and this time it does not have the filter that sets archive to 0. It's only filtering by company ID. So that's really the main difference between this view and the one on the dashboard. Besides the limiting it to 5, it also gives you the option to toggle and include the archived records. So that's the customer's view. Task is very similar. Their data structure is just a little bit different. We have a title and details, and then there's a field for team member, and this is to set which team member the task is assigned to. And then there's a drop down for status. Now these options for assigned to and for status are pulled from the database. So under assigned to, if we look at the data binding, we can see that this comes from the user's collection, and it's filtered by company ID. But this would pull all the team members that are in the database so that you could assign a task to them. Status is pulled from a statuses collection, and this comes pre-populated with statuses when you get the template. But obviously you could add more to the data collection if you want to customize your own statuses. Under the create button, you'll see that similar to some of our other forms, it's disabled by default. If we look at the title field and the event here on key up, it's validating the title. If the title is there for a task, since that's the only required field, it will enable the create button. So it's going to remove the disabled style and remove the disabled class. And then it's going to set the on click to this create task action. And again, very similar, this create task action is going to create the record in the data collection. It's going to close the light box, and it's going to pop down a message that says the new task has been created. Task detail, again, very similar. It loads up all the details from the data collection. So you can see each of the bindings here. Any of these purple elements, if you look at them, you'll see that they have a field in the data collection that the data is pulled from. And then again, at the bottom, we have a table for all of the tasks with a toggle. This time, instead of showing archived, you can show completed and canceled. And then each table has a row, of course, so there's a row for these tasks. And again, we can see we have data bindings here. The title, for example, is pulled from the title field. So team members, again, set up the same way. You've got to add in a detail view for team members and then your list. So I won't go through all of this in detail because it is pretty much the same setup as tasks and customers. But that gives you a good view of how these three views, or I should say how these three sections of the application work. So remember, in your SaaS app, in this navigation, customers, tasks, and team members, it's just loading these list views into this open section. And then if you're clicking on an item in the list view, it'll pull up the detail view, or if you click on the plus icon, it'll give you the add. So that's how those work. And then lastly, we will look at the account view next, and then talk about how you can customize all of this for your SaaS app.